Welcome to the Pro Aging Podcast. I'm Steve Gurney with Positive Aging Sourcebook, and I'm excited to share with you a conversation that we had with Lucy Rose Fischer, who's the author of I'm New at Being Old and Grow Old with Me. Lucy Rose is an amazing woman. She's an artist. She's been honored by the Gerontological Society of America. She has just an amazing outlook and perspective. So let's just jump into this conversation and get to know Lucy Rose Fischer. Lucy, really charged up to have you on our digital discussion, and you really have an interesting background. I'm not really into reading people's bios. I like kind of having a dialogue. So let's just jump right in. Tell us about yourself and this sort of unique path that you have woven for yourself.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, I'm going to tell you, I do have a kind of mixed background, and in part because I've had many years to develop that background. I had a long career as a gerontologist. I got a PhD in sociology, and I did teaching for some years, and then I did research for many years. I directed studies. I wrote research papers. I wrote books. And then when I was about 60 years old, I decided to do something else with my life, and I decided to become an artist. And I had done art on the side, but then I really decided I needed to spend some time. And I'm going to tell you more explicitly about that, but just to give you a little touch of that background. And when you invited me to do this program, I thought I would speak from three different hats. One hat is as an expert on aging as a gerontologist. One hat is an artist because I do a lot of art about aging. And the third hat is my old person hat. So, yeah. You know, it's really interesting to have all of those different perspectives. So,
well, when I saw your bio, I saw those three hats and I was like, wow, we've never had anybody on that could sort of share this type of perspective. And what I like also is that your profession was in the world of aging services. It is that because, you know, what can be challenging to many of us who are in this profession is that when the advice and the guidance that we have been giving to others for many years suddenly becomes us, you know, and it's sort of, and so I'm curious on the perspective that you can share with us. So here, I tell you what, just, well, and, you know, I'm just curious about this one before we jump in. And this is kind of starting with your profession. Is that I saw in your bio that you were honored by the Gerontological Society of America. Can you tell us a little bit about your career and that honor that you received? Like what did you actually do in your career in aging services?
Well, I did studies. Really, I was really more of a researcher than somebody who did the work with the elderly, although, of course, I did interview many hundreds and hundreds of people. And so I did studies and I worked with people I worked both in healthcare and in social services, providing information to people who were providing the services.
What do you think was one of the most notable or, you know, research projects that you found most interesting in your career?
Oh, gosh. Well, one of the last one I did ended up as a book. It ended up winning an award. It's a book called Older Volunteers. And it was a book about what really motivates people to volunteer. And so that was a kind of important contribution to look at why people volunteer and why they don't, and what really, really motivates them. Because one of the issues is that a lot of volunteer organizations want to make sure that the right people come and that they do the work that they do. And there's a number of issues with that. So that was certainly one of the major projects I did. So
yeah, and I think all of us in this field realize how critical volunteers are in caring for our elders, because especially in these challenging times where budgets are limited, both on the provider end of the spectrum, but more on the consumer end of the spectrum, when people sort of talk about how can we make things affordable? Everything's so expensive. It's sort of like it's tapping into a network or creating a network of family, volunteers, what have you, that can provide support, and then supplementing that with the paid providers. So
and volunteering is also really important for older people, for those of us who, if we're not in the paid workforce, that can be a way of engaging people. So that's, and I will talk a little bit about that as well.
Okay, great. Well, I can sort of sit here and babble with you the entire time, but I'm sort of feeling like you've sort of, if you can run us through some things that you'd like to share. And then what I would say to the audience is let's make this engaging. So if you've got questions for Lucy or comments, type them into Q&A or raise your hand and we'll address it. So how does that sound, Lucy?
I'm going to try to share my screen.
Okay, great. And there we go. And I'm going to drop myself off the screen, but I'll pop back in again, especially if there's a question that you might have or that comes up. Oh, there you go. Okay. All right.
What I want to talk about in a way is something that's been important for me, not just when I was older, but that life is a work of art. At one point, I had the phrase on my business cards, life is a work of art, art is a work of life. And I've been an artist maybe most of my life, and I became a gerontologist because I thought that was something that I could really do as a good profession. But I never entirely gave up being an artist. So I've always done some of both. I think, Steve, you mentioned about people working in the field of aging and then becoming old themselves. And what was really amazing to me, I remember sometime many years ago looking in the mirror and seeing a crease over my left eye and thinking, how did that get there? That sort of sense, a moment in time when you face your face and you know that you're getting older. So this drawing is kind of a experience of that. One morning I woke up and didn't recognize myself. And I think all of us, as we get older, we have that experience of either looking in the mirror and seeing someone that maybe reminds you of your mother or your father, and thinking, is that really me? Is that who I've become? Or somebody saying something to you that really makes you think that you look older than you thought you did, that you've now entered that stage of being an older person. I remember my mother telling me that she would look in the mirror and could this really be herself? And I feel like I've long been at this stage now. I want to talk a little bit about my professional work as in the field of aging. And when I was doing research on aging, working with colleagues in the field, we came up with the alive concept. And I talk about this a lot because I think it kind of brings together many of the ideas that I've had as a gerontologist, and also personally in my own experience of growing older. The ALIVE concept, the ALIVE is an acronym, and it stands for activity, learning, intimacy, vitality, and engagement. These are all 5 elements of aging well. Activity refers to physical activity, exercise. This is almost a truism. There's so much research that talks about the importance of exercise, both for physical well-being and for mental well-being and for cognitive well-being. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a marathon runner. Doing a modest amount of exercise, exercising a few times a week, going for long walks, doing what you can, being active, using your muscle, stretching. All of these are really important, and it can make a difference no matter what age you start. So you can start at age 80 and still get a benefit from exercise. It's one of these things that sometimes we feel like we should do and we don't want to do, but it's so important. Just being physically active, moving, can make such a huge difference in the quality of our lives. The second element is learning of the ALIVE concept. And this refers to using your brain, as one of my colleagues used to talk about, sweating with your brain. And it means doing the kind of work that makes you use your brain, and whether it's reading, writing, creative activities, but really using your brain. And this also, there's a kind of use it or lose it phenomenon with learning and with your mind. I think one of the things that many of us fear is the fear of dementia, that we will lose our capacity to be who we are. And this is really a disease. And there's some research that I sort of take heart in, that if you use your mind, you can postpone the ravages of dementia. And to me, that's good enough, because if you can put it off far enough, then maybe you'll always be fine. The third element is intimacy. And by that, I mean having really close friends, having somebody that you know well, whom you can share your soul, you can share who you really are, somebody whom you really care about and cares about you. It can be a spouse, it can be a friend, but somebody who's close to you. There's research on the opposite of this, on social isolation, that social isolation is as devastating to our physical well-being as smoking, that it has as much of an impact as smoking. So that intimacy is a really important element. The fourth element, vitality, is a social psychological factor. It's energy and optimism. It's having a positive value on life. One of the things that I've talked about is surrounding yourself with positive people, because that makes a difference in how positive you can be. Having a sense of purpose is really an important element in well-being. Optimism is an interesting quality. I have a husband who is the most optimistic person I know. And it's annoying. He's the one who gets up in the morning and is ready to go. At 5 a.m, he's ready to go. I'll tell you a story about how optimistic my husband is. He started playing cello at age 73. Now, somebody told him that you have to put in 10,000 hours of practice to be a real cello player, to be able to play music, to play in an orchestra or play in some sort of quintet or something. So So he figures by the time he's 118, he'll be really good and able to play the music that he really loves. That is an example of optimism. Now, the fifth element is engagement. And engagement is being involved with the wider society. And that can be through work, through community programs, through volunteer work. And that's also really important, not just being isolated from intimate relationships, but being isolated from the wider society. And what I want to say about these is that all of these take special effort as you get older. One of the problems with getting older is that there can be a kind of slippage, and all of these elements of well-being may not happen as easily. If you're going to a workplace, you're normally engaged with other people. If you're learning for your work, this is something that you do. If you have to get out of the house, you're going to be moving. But if you're older, especially over time, these are the things that can be losses in older age. And I'll tell you one other thing. I have a sort of personal mission, and that is the alive concept means something personal to me, that I want to be really alive as long as I'm alive. We don't know how long we'll live. We don't know all the things that will happen to us, but we can make it happen that as long as we're here, as long as we're on this side, we can be really alive. So I had a career as a researcher in aging, as a teacher in aging, and I did studies. I directed studies. I wrote articles. I went to meetings, but I always had art. I would paint on vacation, and I would sketch in meetings. And you can sort of picture me. I couldn't sketch if I was leading the meeting, but if I was in the meeting, if I was in a seminar or some kind of program, I could be sketching all the people sitting around me. And it wasn't unusual for the sketching that I did to disrupt the meeting I was in. All of a sudden, somebody would notice that I was sketching people, and they'd start passing the pages around. And suddenly the speaker would notice that everybody was looking at these sketches that I had done. I became an artist at age 60, and I wanted an art career, or I launched my art career at age 60. And let me tell you a little bit about that experience. I was doing research. I had a position as a senior researcher, and my husband and I had gone on vacation to Colorado. We were planning to hike and to go to Aspen to listen to music. We were visiting my nephew who lived in Denver, and we took them out. We took him and his wife out for dinner to a fancy restaurant, and we had a dessert that we shared called Death by Chocolate. Then we went for a walk up a hill, and my husband had a heart attack, and we didn't know it. He was clutching his chest, and he thought, and I thought, we were two PhDs, here we are. We think it's altitude sickness. No, we're up in the mountains, it's altitude sickness. So we drive to Aspen, and I make him drive because I'm afraid of driving on these mountain roads. He can barely walk. He's, has trouble breathing. We go for a little hike the next day. Then the next day we say, maybe we should have this checked out. So we go to a clinic. They do some tests, and they say, have you always had this abnormality? And he says, what abnormality? They send him call an ambulance, send him to the hospital, and ask him and Aspen, and then they helicopter him back to Denver. I drive back. By the time I get back, we learned that he has a blockage in his main, a 90% blockage in his main artery, and they say he needs to have triple bypass surgery. And he asks, can he go back to Minnesota? And they say no. And he asks, can he have a second opinion? And they say no. And they ask, when are you going to do the surgery? And they say now. And so he has this surgery, and we were extraordinarily lucky. It worked out very well. He has since gone biking down the length of the Mississippi River. He's very active, and we just feel grateful. But it changed our life. You have this brush with mortality. Art had been my hobby on the side, and it was something that I always loved, but it wasn't my profession. But I decided that I needed to spend some of my life doing art, really focusing on art. And it was because of that sense. There's a gerontologist who said that people reach a certain age when they think about their age differently. They think about their age not in terms of how many years they've lived, but in how many years they have left. How many years left? And so I think that's what came to me, that his heart attack really in a visceral way brought that home. So I began doing something that I taught myself. I began painting upside down, inside out, and backwards on hand-blown glass. And a lot of the art was about the experience of aging. So here are a few pieces that I've done. There are pieces of glass, and you see me painting inside a large bowl. And there's an ancient Chinese tradition for painting in glass. I don't know how they do that. I did this on my own. I made it up on my own, and just almost by accident. My art tends to be really whimsical. So I'll show you. This is one of the pieces. Life is a game of Monopoly, and it's all on glass with glass figures, and it's a takeoff on the game of Monopoly, and the different sides of the boards have stages of a person's life, seasons of the year, times of day, and stages of humanity from the Stone Age to the Web Age. And then there's, in the game of Monopoly, there are these different cards that you can play, and I don't remember exactly what they're called, but I call them fate and fortune. Fate are the bad things that can happen, like, go to the hospital, spend $100,000, or, have your roof fixed, spend $10,000. Fortune are the good things that can happen, and sell art, earn 35 cents. And here's another piece. This is a sort of almost life-size piece. I seem to be falling apart. And I don't know about the rest of you, but, there are times in my life when I feel like I have it all together. I'm just on top of it. Everything's organized. I can do anything. And then there are times like the next moment when I seem to be falling apart, where I can't seem to get control over anything in my life. And so I express this in my art. And this is another one. This is a more than life-size portrait called The Breakdown of Movable Parts. And this is something I've also experienced as I've grown older, that, There are hazards in aging. I think Betty Davis is credited with saying that old age is not for sissies, because there are difficult things. There can be small things. Your knees hurt, your bones crack, your hair gets thinner. All these things that just happen to you. But there are also more serious things, more hazards with aging. And so I don't want to minimize those, but I also think there are many good things with aging as well. And so my art expresses both the difficult parts that I think one way of dealing with it is by laughing and by having whimsy about all the experiences of aging.
Well, Lucy, you've recruited a bunch of members of your fan club. Some of the comments are great, and everybody seems to be very impressed with your art. A couple of questions that came in are any of these pieces for sale, or do you have prints that folks can buy? And then I know we're in the COVID world, but do you have exhibits or anything that you?
I've had many exhibits. I've lost count, over 100, I'm sure. Lost count. I have a website, and I should put that on the screen at some.
I actually put it in chat already.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So that's where people can see what they could buy.
Yes, and things are for sale.
Okay.
I will be updating my website, but many of the pieces are there, and yes, and I have a newsletter, so I like to correspond with people. I write little stories about every couple of weeks, and so if people want to sign up for my newsletter, they can do that too on the website.
Okay, great.
A way of sort of keeping up with it. Were there any other questions, Steve?
Just, I mean, more comments on just how impressive. Love the Monopoly piece. When and where are you doing exhibit? Fabulous themes, whimsical wisdom. That's so very uplifting. Thank you. You should do an exhibit and have your optimistic husband play the cello. And then one comment: have you presented at Mayo Clinic in Minnesota? I'm assuming you're from Minnesota. Is that where you are right now?
I'm not from Minnesota. I'm actually I grew up in a small town in Upper New York State, but I've lived here for 41 years. So I've lived here longer than I've lived anyplace else. And we live in downtown Minneapolis. And my husband and I recently moved to a senior housing place in downtown Minneapolis, where they have wonderful programs. So
that's great. And I hear an eruption in the audience of somebody as influential and energized and purposeful as you, living in a senior living community, because we know there are literally thousands of people across the country just like yourself that are living in senior communities. But in general, we have a stigma on these communities that they're only for people at the end of the road, and you're just going to have people doing things for you, when in reality it could be further from the truth.
Well, it was interesting because I had an artist friend. I was a group of 4 artists that public television did a program about us, and because we were doing art about aging. And one of my friends is about 10 years older, and she decided to move into senior housing, but she moved too late. So by the time she moved, both physically and cognitively, she couldn't really manage it. And it was very hard. And so we decided we'd move too early. When we're still vital, we're still really working, we're still doing stuff. And, we probably can't take advantage of all the programs because we're too busy, but we're here. And it, a move is hard, and it was better to do it when we have all our faculties about us. So,
yeah. Now let me. You've tapped into a topic that I know is of interest to me and of interest to many in the audience. And I don't want to derail the conversation about your books and the art. I want to dive into that a little bit. I definitely want you to dive into that a little bit deeper. But if you don't mind sort of sharing, like, how did you make this decision? How did you select the community that you and your husband moved into? And what were some of the hurdles? I know that a lot of people talk about, like, what did your home look like before, and how did you manage sort of the downsizing, letting go of possessions process? If you don't mind just sharing some of that.
Well, I'll share a couple things. First of all, about a year before we decided to move, there was a flood in our basement, or maybe 2 years before, and we had to clear out our entire basement. I had a lot of art stored there, and I made a decision then that I was going to give away a lot of art, not the art that was up, that was on exhibit, but stuff that had been previously on exhibit, was sitting in the basement. So I invited people with my newsletter and with their neighborhoods blog, and within about 45 minutes, I had given away about 300 pieces of art. And it was interesting. I mean, it was bittersweet. It was stuff that I'd, accumulated over many years, including, when I wasn't an artist. I took photos of things, so I have a little album of my art. But it also was a sense of release. And people, I still run into people who say, they have my art in their houses, and it's better than it was in my basement. So that actually helped, because that meant that we had made a step. Many artists I know have, sort of this dilemma. What do you do with all your art? I still have a lot. I keep creating more. So it's not over. And we found this place. The marketing person who introduced us said, we don't do bingo here. And that really was a very positive thing for me, that it's a very intellectually vibrant community in downtown Minneapolis. It's right in the middle of cultural Minneapolis, across the street from McPhail Center for Music, where my husband takes his cello lessons, down the street from Major Museum, down the street from the Guthrie Theater. So it's, of course, during the pandemic, it's different. Because
well, and that was, I was just, again, I want to get back to you sharing some of your art and your books, but just give us a glimpse of what was it like in your community with the COVID-19 lockdown, and did you reflect on, because I've had some conversations with people who made the move into senior communities, and they reflect on, okay, what would this be like if I was back in my old home? Any reflections on that?
Well, I think we are not able to take full advantage of having the kind of senior community that we had when we first we first moved here a year ago. And we can't try. I mean, like everybody else is dealing with this. But I think the community has, like many other places, has adapted. Thank God for Zoom. I mean, really, because you think about the 1918 pandemic, when you didn't have this stuff. I mean, it's not perfect. There are issues with it, but at least, we can continue learning. My husband has started a new career as a retirement coach, and he's been doing it over Zoom. And I'm giving lectures over Zoom, and you can still do things. The winter is going to be tough. We've been able to do things outdoors, but the winter will be tough, and we'll live through it somehow. But
yeah, well, and I recently had a call from somebody who was living at home, and she had delayed her entrance into a community, and she was calling me up to sort of bounce ideas and because her family and her friends were like, oh yeah, you can't move into those communities in this sort of COVID crisis. But she shared with me, she said, I feel very isolated and alone here all by myself in my home. At least I could be in a community isolated and alone where I know that there's things, right outside my door, and people that can help and serve me and connect with others. So, boy, this is you're just a treasure trove of different concepts. And
we even have exercise on Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. So
right from the community, from one of the.
so good. Well, let me get you back on track with what you're sharing with us. It looks like this is one of your books that you have
This
here.
is one of the books. It's called "I Knew It Being Old," and I'm just going to show you a few pieces from it. This book is another kind of whimsical perspective on aging, and I don't want to read a lot of it because I don't want to take that time. I want to give time for a discussion, but I'll read a little bit from it. The first image begins with, "I'm venturing into outer space, traveling toward an alien universe, the galaxy of the old ones. My baggage is stuffed with younger versions of myself. Am I ready for this journey?" And, I think one of the things that really surprised me when I got older myself is that I was surprised. I'd been doing research for so many years on aging and writing books on it and writing, doing papers on it. How could I possibly be surprised when I got old myself? But that was the experience, because I think there's a sense that this old age is some sort of an alien universe. And that's what I tried to express in this. There's also an issue of ageism. And I think ageism is often subtle. It's not necessarily immediately in your face, but we live in a society where age is not respected so much. So this is one of my images about ageism. Sometimes younger people seem to regard mature women like me as odd specimens of a different species. I think one of the things that we often particularly fear is the cognitive, are we going to lose our minds? So this is one of the images. "I've begun losing words, especially proper nouns. Names of people and places and ordinary words float around and away. I'm reluctant to make introductions. In the middle of a sentence, I might forget the name of a good friend." I've given lectures about aging and this book to many, many people. And I think this phenomenon of losing words is simply universal. Whether it leads to dementia or not, it's simply universal. This is something that happens, and it starts early. Not so, you don't have to be 80. It starts in your 40s, 50s, I think. But it's scary. And so I say, I'm afraid this could be the beginning of the unraveling of my mind. And then there's this, but at least for now, I still have all my marbles. But you notice some of those marbles are starting to roll away a little bit. That's also part of the experience of it. And I'll just show you one more from this book. "I launch a new life as an artist, giving rebirth to myself. Luminous colors spill out of me. I bear visions, images, art." And for me, art has been a way of dealing with my own aging, both because I do art about aging, but also because it's been life-sustaining. And I'm going to tell you about a more recent book. My other book came out 10 years ago. This one just came out last year, and it's called "Grow Old with Me." And it's a story about my marriage. And it was sort of in response to the fact that I think it's almost a miracle that I had a good marriage, because it's almost an accident that somehow it worked out. So this is called "Grow Old with Me." And I'll just read you a little bit from that.
These are wonderful, Lucy. Your insights and art are beautiful, and the comments and that people are making are you've truly touched a nerve. This is beautiful.
Oh, well, this was, as I say, much of my art is whimsical. So one of my ideas was we meet at the university where sex hormones hover in the air. So, part of the idea is that you're making your life mate at a time when this is what a university is all about. It happened that we got married in Upper New York State, and there was a blizzard the night before our wedding. So, with a little bit of homage to Chagall, I've presented us as getting married in the midst of snow. Oh, and this one I'll just read you from the text. We're at a resort in a tropical country. I'm sitting by the swimming pool with my glasses off, and I notice a balding older man standing on the other side of the pool. His pale pink flesh bulges a little over his striped bathing trunks. Suddenly I realized that older man is you. It was my husband that I was looking at. So those are two picture books. And, you asked about the pandemic and how that affected. When we picked out this apartment, we happened to find a large apartment that had enough space for each of us to have an office. And mine is a combination office where I do writing and my studio. And as the pandemic came, I started doing art about the pandemic, also this whimsical art. Like one of them is about the pandemic dance. This is the way we walk nowadays. We have to avoid contact, so we sort of have to skip to the side as we walk. Or about the culture of wearing masks and how that becomes a new fashion statement with the masks. And also what's happening with protests in our time, that this is a time of kind of unrest in many different ways. And so for me, doing these colorful paintings has been a kind of a sense of comfort in the pandemic, that I'm still alive, I'm still doing stuff, I'm still living and doing my work. And then I've also, this was not exactly what I planned, but I had written a book about my late brother, who was a journalist in Vietnam in the early 1960s. And so, this book came out in the pandemic. It wasn't exactly what I had hoped for, but I've been doing lectures about this book, which has been, gotten nice reviews. And my brother died 55 years ago, and I've sort of written this book with him, which gives ghost writing a whole new, the meaning of ghost written a whole new meaning. And one other thing, I've been doing art workshops for seniors. In Minneapolis, in Minnesota, there's a wonderful group called Compass that places artists in nursing homes and senior living facilities and adult daycare and assisted living. And so I've been doing collage art. And I've been doing this for about 10 years with senior facilities of all levels. And so that's also been really an exciting thing as part of my new life as an artist, and sort of bringing aging and gerontology and all of this together. So I think that's it. And I will stop screen sharing.
That's it. That's a lot. What a wonderful tribute to your brother, and what a creative way to celebrate his life. Do you mind me asking, did he pass away? How did he How'd your brother
He
pass
actually
away?
died in a plane crash in Vietnam 55 years ago. And he was a writer and an artist. And he kept all these journals and all of his materials because he wanted to write novels based on these materials. And so I've sort of written the book that he would have written if he had lived. It's taken me such a long time. It's almost embarrassing how long I've been working on this book. But
yeah, but what a creative way to approach it, and it's something that I think that all of us, whether it's a published book or just a memoir, from the perspective of our loved people that are no longer with us, it's probably
it's
very
just published by Spark Press, and it just came out in August. So and it's available. So.
Great. Well, let me, number one, the comments are just wonderful. I love this one from Ellen, who says, what a lovely way to spend some time today. Nice to meet you, Lucy. Thank you. And this is, guys, this is really one of the exciting things about what's happening, and the fact that we transformed our conversations to these digital platforms is we would have never had the opportunity to meet Lucy. It's easy for her. It's easy for us. And you've really inspired a lot of people. I love Eileen Wilkinson's comment. She says, after many moons in elder care, it also hit me about this too, that I'm growing older. Not just my 96-year-old mom. I switched to purposeful art, gathering to reduce isolation, and your words resonate deeply with me. Goosebumps. Let's see. Ada Horsfeld says, do you have suggestions on where kids can go to learn to draw and paint?
Kids can draw. Well,
like if you could rewind the clock, if you were a young child or a teenager in high school, like to develop this craft, what would you recommend?
I think, there are lots of places that offer art classes, and I would really encourage. I had a student in a nursing home, and she told me that she loved art as a kid, and her parents just never encouraged her. So, I think whatever age you are, do it. There are community classes. I mean, there's so many places to do it, and just do it. I wanted to say one other thing too. I'm 76. And if I had, from years before, if I had looked into the future, I never would have expected that this would be my life at age 76. I mean, I don't know about the rest of your audience, but it would never have occurred to me that I would be writing books, giving talks, just having such an exciting life that in some ways is more exciting now than it was when I was 40. When I was trying to make a living and do all these things. I mean, it's a fabulous life. We're so lucky. Really, I feel so grateful and lucky. So
this is, that statement there, I know, is what we're all kind of gleaning from you. And Olive says, you've given me hope as I age. I'm not yet 60, but you've given me more excitement to approach my later years. Thank you. I'm so excited to be in your company. Incredible legacy. Thank you for your joyful sharing. The arts speak to all types of learners, as we are so grateful. And I really do feel that the arts, as we grow older, as we graduate from our careers and family, that the importance of art is emphasized. Like the older I get, the more I recognize that. And when you hear in the news about like art programs being not funded and things like that, it just breaks your heart. Whereas I know my younger self is being more practical. It's sort of like, well, yes, of course they would defund an art program, but it's so important, as you've emphasized.
It's so important as part of creativity is what makes us human. It's just whether it's in the sciences or the arts, it's that creativity is makes us who we are and makes us vital.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic. So let's see, folks. we're going to start winding down. And usually when I say we're going to start winding down, that's when people all of a sudden they raise their hands or they type in a question. But I'm going to give you guys advance warning that we're going to wind down. Lucy, this has been phenomenal. I think I'd love to have you back on again, because I might promote this in a different way so that our audience would be exponentially larger. It's been great. I've said on these discussions that, oftentimes, like, we have quote unquote experts lecturing to experts, and it's not just on these discussions, it's at conferences on aging and things of that nature. And what I think is very important is for all of us to have folks that are walking the walk in elderhood, telling their stories. Is that it's so much more powerful hearing your story than us sort of talking about ways that you could live a purposeful life. I'm going to share this because in the spirit of your paintings, are you familiar with this series of photographs? They're very similar to what you've
yes.
These are the most wonderful series of photographs that sort of also speak to what you are talking about, where you wake up one morning and all of a sudden you don't recognize the person that you're staring at in the mirror. And
done paintings on the same theme, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Lorraine Harbaugh was inspired by your talk when we started talking about the fact that you're living in a quote unquote senior living community. I still have a problem with sort of age segregated housing of any type, but she was sort of inspired by that conversation. Maybe kind of closing on any words of wisdom that, if somebody as dynamic as yourself could be living in a community like this, the value that is as an option, and for people not to not look into it because it's age segregated.
Well, it is an issue that it's age segregated, but they're also sometimes looking ahead at what you might need. I mean, one of the things that we were concerned about was having something on one floor. We're fine now. I mean, we go hiking, we don't need to be on one floor, but we figured at some point we will. And the idea was that it would be better to move early when we could manage it. Because I saw my friend who was much older sort of losing all control over that move. And we wanted to do it when we could. So
this is great. Well, I'm going to share all these comments in chat with you and with everybody. Don't worry, we'll record this. We'll share this, the chat transcript. And the beauty is that we can share this recording with our friends and family, Lucy, and hopefully you can inspire many, many more people. But definitely we're going to stay in touch. Let's sign up I'll sign up for your email, and I hope everybody else does too. And we hope that we can stay connected with you over the years. I thank you for your time today.
Thank you. And I'll be happy to talk again.
Okay. Thanks so much. We'll see everybody soon. Okay.